Welcome to Collective Soulversations. I'm Jody Jones, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this amazing journey exploring spirituality, healing, and personal growth. With over 15 years of experience as a psychic medium and energy healer, I've made it my mission to help people connect with their true selves, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. In every episode, I chat with incredible guests who bring their own unique stories and insights to the table. We dive into different tools and practices that can help support you on your path of self-discovery. So whether you're just starting out or you've been in this journey for a while, Collective Soulversations is all about creating a friendly and welcoming space for us to explore the mysteries of the soul together. So grab your favorite cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into this enlightening adventure together. Hey, so you may notice that things have changed a little bit. There were two of us that were doing a podcast, and now there is one of us. So I just wanted to let you guys know that Leah will no longer be doing the podcast with me. As she said herself, there's just too many moving parts in her life right now for her to fit it all in and not feel like she's being stressed. So she's going to go and take care of all of her moving parts. And I will continue to show up for you guys weekly with the podcast. You know, this is something that I had been thinking about doing for a really long time. And I was looking for a project that I could feel light and fun about. And I absolutely love meeting new people. I love having inspiring conversations. And so the podcast is the perfect platform for this. So I'm excited to continue doing this with you guys. I'm excited to be bringing new guests for you to meet every week. I'm looking forward to having my own ascension process helped along the way by other people coming in and sharing their stories and their gifts and their ideas. And of course, as we go through this process together, I'm not going to resonate with everything that everybody says. I'm not going to agree with everything everybody says, and that's okay. But I'm going to continue bringing on people that are outside of my comfort zone and outside of my box because it's a big world and we come here to experience and explore. And so part of that exploration is kind of seeing all views. And so I hope that that's what this podcast will do. And I hope that you guys find it to be worthy to show up and listen to. And I appreciate all of your support and your comments. And if there's anybody that you'd like me to bring onto the show, definitely pop over to my website and send me an email. And that's at jody-jones.com. Thank you guys so much for showing up, and there's a new episode coming up next. Hey, everybody, welcome to Collective Soulversations. We are here with Chrys Kyng, and this is a redo. So I'm going to reintroduce Chrys to everybody so that you guys know all of the great things about him. Now, Chrys has been obsessed with witches, Native American culture, astrology, and all things paranormal from an early age. And he always knew that he came here with a big mission. You'll see why. His experience as a musician, actor, and plant based health coach laid the foundational work that he offers today. And after having several awakenings, of course, he's going to talk to us about that, and profound mystical experiences, he left his high paying corporate job to pursue his full time passion of doing all the stuff that he's doing. So now Chrys is a shamanic healer, a spiritual business mentor, founder of Ascended Astrology and Apathy Care, Medicine Alchemy, and as well as the creator of Microdose, which is a line of high performing microdosing blends. So Chrys says that he loves creating magical experiences in the form of shamanic ceremonies and medicine retreats, and he facilitates in sacred locations all across the globe. And he's passionate about helping light workers, and that's how we kind of met. We'll talk about that. And star seeds, and in activating their soul mission and healing themselves, teaching them how to heal themselves by tapping out of the false matrix and creating a new earth. And so Chrys has tons of offerings. He has single sessions, he does mentorship containers, he does private and group retreats, he does psychedelic integration, he does certification programs, courses. He has a virtual community and shamanic activation. So, welcome, Chrys. Thank you so much for being back on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and an honor to share space with all your listeners and to be seen by them and to share my story. And just thank you for allowing me to come back on here and redo.
Beautiful. Awesome. That's awesome. And so I want us, because we, and we won't go too much into it because of course Leah's not here to say her side of any of it. But it was a great conversation that we had. It was, so much stuff came up. Obviously, we're not going to try and do that all over again. We will just let it flow the way that it needs to flow. But I want everybody to get to know who Chrys is, though, and take us back with your backstory, where you came from, kind of how you got here. Because you have so much to share with us. We'll obviously I'll have to have you back, but try and do it as in as condensed as you can, so we can get into all the good stuff for sure.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, into a family of, well, I was the third boy. I don't identify as male the way other males do. I do sort of feel like a dual gender, and I've always felt that way my whole life. But I was born into a male body, and I have three brothers and one sister, and I grew up in a house of basketball players, construction workers, blue collar people. Uh, Good old fashioned folks and very intuitive, very psychic people. My family comes from Celts and Native Americans. We shared a lot of that in the family. There was a lot of trauma I experienced as a child, especially with my father and men. But g- generally, there was also a lot of love there too, as my father was abused by his father. And so it was a genetic program that was passed down as well. And there was a lot of activity in our home. Even my brothers saw things, my dad would see things. There was a lot of things that happened in that home before they moved in. Such as satanic ritual abuse that happened in the bedroom that I grew up in, and we heard about it, but I didn't get confirmation until I was an adult that had happened in that home. And that is something that I've come into this grid and into this reality to clear and shine light on and transmute. So, of course, it would end up that way. But I also, from a very early age, remembered things. I questioned things. I wanted to be a Christian so bad. I would go to church. My parents were not religious because I wanted to feel the love of Jesus and the love of Christ. And I felt something. I felt these memories and this understanding that there was more, but none of that resonated in that way. And so from the time I was a little kid, I also loved all things theater, music, dance. I was very expressive. I have a stellium in Leo in my tropical astrology chart, which means I have 5 placements in Leo. So of course, acting and theater and all of that and I also have Gemini Sun and Gemini Mercury. So that combination is going to find its way into some type of stage setting or theater setting or writing, all things creative. And I definitely was, but I would dress like a Power Ranger, yes, but I'd also dress up in my mom's uh nightgowns, and I would wear her red shoes, and I would click them together, and I would say there's no place like home because The Wizard of Oz was my favorite movie. I loved everything about witches, hocus pocus, all of that kind of stuff. I was obsessed with witches. I was obsessed with kings and like royalty, like King Henry VIII. I mean, I didn't know where any of that was coming from, but as a kid, I didn't want to be Dorothy. If I'm going to be honest with you all, I had no interest in being Dorothy. I wanted those red shoes. I can tell you
Right.
that. Okay, I
Right.
wanted those Louboutins that came from Oz, but I wanted to be the Wicked Witch of the West. I wanted to be a witch, and
You
I
knew where the
dressed as
power was.
I would dress as the Wicked Witch of the West for Halloween every year, and my parents would take me, and so I was never shamed by my family for being feminine or liking girly things or being intuitive. My parents, my mom, I was the only child that my mom had to buy books for, like how to raise your spirited child, how to raise your, she didn't know what to do with me, and I'm the only manifester for those human design experts out there. I'm the only human design manifester in my whole family, which is
Oh, wow.
typical for us because we make up 8 to 9% of the whole population. So there was a lot that made me different from the rest of my family from the very beginning. I was also um, physically, mentally, and verbally abused for that manifester power and the energy. My dad did not shame me for dressing like the Wicked Witch of the West. He shamed me for being so clear in myself and being so uncontrollable. And I was a star seed who came into this life and chose him as my dad. And I think I knew that. And that's why I was like, what are you doing telling me what to do? I should be telling
Right.
you what to do. You should be
Right.
listening to me.
Right.
But from a very early age, I also knew I was different from on a gender level, which was very shameful for me. And no one even gave me that shame. It was almost like it was in my DNA from being passed down. I also, as I started to get older, realized that I was not straight or
Right.
heterosexual. So that caused a lot of shame in my childhood of suicidal ideation. When I would blow my candles out on my birthday, that was my wish to not be gay because I didn't know why God was punishing me. Why do I have to have this life that is more difficult than other people? And so that has
Right.
shown up several times in my life. So the idea of being wicked or this wicked witch has shown up in my life along the way. And when I went to a performing arts high school. So when I was 14 years old, in Louisville, they have a school called the Youth Performing Arts School where your whole high school is like High School Musical, okay, for
Oh,
four
that's cool.
years. It was very competitive, and there was some dance moms toxicity going on, but it was beautiful, and I wouldn't take it back for the world. And about a year after, I went into that school a year after the musical Wicked came out. Okay, so everyone was talking about Wicked when I went into high school. And I remember my mom having the book Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West when I was a little kid, and remember being like, I want to read it, and it's an adult book. It's not like the musical. So
Right.
she wouldn't let me read it. But Elphaba is her name in Wicked. The Wicked Witch Elphaba, she just kept showing up in the green skin, and I always would dress and paint my skin green and put the fingers
Mhm.
on and the black hat. And there was just something I was remembering. I have a lot of past lives as witches and being burned at the stake. I also have past lives as witch hunters. Okay, because we've been all kinds of things in
Right.
these.
The duality, right?
Very much so. And so I was remembering many things as I was growing up. But as I got into high school and I started to mature a little bit more, someone at 16 years old gave me a book called The Complete Astrologer, which is right there. And it's from the 1970s. And I was exposed to the world of astrology from a very early age. And by the time I was 16, I had developed the proclivity toward atheism. And that started when I was 11. So when I was 11 years old, there was a death in the family. And I just remember looking at my cousin Angie in the casket and sort of coming out of my body and dissociating a little bit. And I don't know if that was the exact moment that it happened, but I think the idea of death or seeing that may have opened something for me. But all
Right.
around that time, I started to develop a strong belief system that none of this was real. It was
Hmm.
all made up, and that I was having a dream, and that
Wow.
I was God, and that when I died in this incarnation, I would wake up as God and know how to create reality from the mistakes or the stuff that I saw happen. I remember being 13 and a girl fell off of her bike in the neighborhood, and blood bothered me. If I saw blood, it really bothered me or caused my body to have a reaction. I've been an empath since I was born, and I remember the blood bothered me, but I didn't go help her. And my mom asked me, she goes, "Why didn't you go help her?" And
Mhm.
I said, "Because it's not real.
Hmm.
That wasn't real. it's just showing me what not to create when I become God again. And I remember her having a whole conversation with me because I would go to church and come back with all the questions. If God is
Mhm.
all knowing and all seeing and he knows the future, doesn't he already know if we're going to heaven and hell or not? Why is he punishing us by using this life? No
Right.
answer for that. No answer for any of it.
Right.
So I remember that was a strong belief, and it did not feel good at the time. It felt a little empty sometimes. It felt like things were meaningless. So
Right.
while I had this beautiful high school musical experience and lots of friends, and my human personality can be very vivacious and very Leo and very warm, there was always something under the surface that no one ever knew about, this shame, this darkness, this feeling of being evil. What is evil? I remember when I was 7 years old um, I was driving in the car with my grandmother, and we were listening to the radio, and there was a news story about how someone had murdered this 19-year-old, I remember them being very young, had murdered someone, and there was a murder that happened downtown. And I remember asking my grandmother, how did they become that? And she said, well, they're just bad people. There are bad people in the world. And I remember looking out the window. It's one of my most vivid childhood memories and saying to myself, I really hope I don't become that.
Hmm.
Because I thought they were children. I'm sure they didn't plan on becoming bad. What
Right.
made them go bad? And that's what's interesting about the musical Wicked, because it starts off with Glinda in front of the Munchkin land from this perspective, saying, you know, are people born wicked or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? And so
Right.
that sort of idea showed up in me from a very early age, and I just, of course it did, I should say, because
Mhm.
Gemini Sun and Gemini Mercury people are going to experience duality states more so than the average person,
Right.
because we experience, Gemini is known for being multiple personalities. It's also known for
Yes.
having a bipolar tendency.
Right.
And those things definitely showed up in me as well. So I sort of was always at the center point of like, what is good? What is bad? Is it my choice? Is it, and from a very early age. And as I got older and, I was very afraid of the house that I was in when it was dark because of the spirits in there and the energies and the things I would see. But my family was also obsessed with horror movies. My grandmother had Dracula and the Mummy and Frankenstein statues in her house. Like we were raised on scary movies.
Wow.
And we were also raised on, some of the tales that my great great grandmother, who was half Cherokee, would tell about the spirits of the land. And my mother and my father are both psychic. Pisces sun, my dad, Pisces moon, my mom, and Cancer rising, my mom, like myself. So there, I was raised by very psychic, intuitive, emotional people who, when working really hard and under a lot of stress and drinking a lot, there was a lot of trauma that happened as well. Pisces
Right.
likes to escape, and they definitely do. But as I got older and I got into astrology, because of that belief of none of this is real and it's all a dream, I remember at 17 years old sort of letting go of that. And the next step after that belief was atheism for me. That was the only thing that made logical sense to my left side brain at the time.
Right.
And when as I got a little bit older, 17, 18, is when the lights started going out. So there is a term, it's called slider. It stands for street light interference. I remember driving in my very first car, and when I would drive under street lights or look at them, they would go out. And this was
Hmm.
happening every day. It hasn't happened in the past 5 years as much, but before 2019, it was every single day, if not multiple times a day. Even when I would
Really.
talk about it with friends, it would happen.
Right.
And this is a phenomenon that I learned during my Kundalini awakening is called slider. I
Hmm.
still don't know if it relates to the type of starseed lineage that I'm come from or the soul mission or whatever, what kind of empath I am. I don't have the full answers around it yet. But that started to happen. And because I had so many speeding tickets as a young person as well, I used to think there were radars in the lights and that the cops were putting radars in the lights. And if the light went out, that's who they knew to arrest or to pull over. And I quickly learned that that wasn't the case.
Right.
And so I started communicating with it, and it would communicate with me, these lights. I would say, if you all are spirit, if something's trying to communicate with me, make the light go out, and it would go out. So I started having these experiences that were psychic. I started having this pull toward Buddhism and different teachings. And then I found my way out of atheism around 19, 20 years old, and into this more spiritual belief of things and consciousness. And that's when I found ayahuasca and the Native American church in Kentucky that holds ayahuasca ceremonies. And that's when I found Abraham Hicks. And I found, the law of attraction at 20 years old. And that really laid the groundwork for, like, there is something beyond. I can believe in these spirits. And then in 2012, the year, you all, the year for many of us light workers and ascended souls, I found myself in a karmic relationship with someone who has Scorpio sun and Leo moon, like myself. And he was sort of a mirror image of me, even physically in certain ways. He embodied all the things I was scared of, all the things that I considered to be the shadow parts of myself. He even told me that he sold his soul to the devil for fame because we were working on a music album, because I love music. And he does have borderline personality disorder. I do know that now, after all these years. But back then, that stuff freaked me out, and he really pulled me in, and it really awakened me. It was the first time I felt depression and anxiety on a cellular level, okay?
Right.
Just empty, dark night of the soul after we exited our time together.
Right. Right.
And I have a lot of love for him, and compassion and appreciation. I even knew then that it was special, that even though I was in a depression after that, something happened to me. It
Yeah.
opened me up, and the things that he revealed really catapulted me into where I am now. Because from that point forward, I moved, I became vegan. I mean, there were so many things that happened over the years that led up to this point. And all the while, I'm teaching astrology classes to the people I'm working with, to my friends, to people down at the library when I'm 20, 21 years old. I'm holding meditation groups. I'm going to meditation groups, and my third eye is opening, and I didn't even know what that was at
Right.
20, 21 years old, or I didn't really believe in chakras back then. I have to have my own experience. I have a
Right.
lot of woman in me, but I have a lot of man too. I have a lot of left brain, denser, analytical side that needs a little bit of that to go with the intuitive aspect,
Right.
or the feeling state, or the reception state. And it took me years to marry them together, but it wasn't until I was 27 years old, which was prophesized by a psychic that I went to during that relationship, because that relationship in 2012 blasted me open. And did I go to a therapist? Hell no. I went to a psychic where I should have gone.
Of course.
So I went to a psychic medium. I remember my parents being like, "Why are you so obsessed with Long Island Medium and Lisa Williams and John Edwards?" Because my parents loved them too, but I was obsessed with Long Island Medium and Teresa
Right.
Caputo. I wanted to be her. I wanted to be a medium so bad. I remember that, like crying about it because God didn't give me that gift when I was 13, 14 years old. And then I found out he did. It was there the whole time.
Right.
That
Right.
psychic medium, she's in Bardstown, Kentucky. Beth Ballard is her name at All of Tulip Moons. Um, she reminds me a lot of you, Jody. You all are very similar. You all even sort of look similar, the way she looked back then in
Right.
2012 and
Right.
2013 when I was going to see her. She told me then, you can do what I do. Do you know that? And all I could think of was, help me with this guy. Help me heal from this guy. I didn't care. And then another time that I saw her, she told me that millions of people would know my name, that I would be famous. And so I thought it was for the acting. I thought it was the music I was working
Right.
on, or the directing. Um, I didn't know it was going to be all of this. And she said, "You're going to have your own business." And I'll never forget it. Give me just a second. I don't know if you'll put this on YouTube and if the video will be seen, but for those of you who are listening, I'm showing Jody something. These are actually the sheets that she drew
Oh
back in
wow.
2013. I don't know if you can see that, but these are the different sheets. Every time I would see her, she would draw my aura. She would get the names of people and write them there. And so on one of these, it even says, you'll have your own plane. And I remember thinking, this must all be from the acting in Hollywood and all
Right.
that
Right.
stuff. which is so interesting because now we're learning that the music industry in Hollywood is the most dense satanic thing that's happening out there. And I'm like, no wonder spirit kept me from getting into that
Right. Took you
realm.
in the other direction.
But oh, here it is. She says, when you're 27, everything will begin for you. So she told me that when I turn 27, everything will begin. She said,
Right.
you won't have a plane when you're 27, but everything that you are here to do will begin when you're 27.
And that was in what year?
The year I went through Kundalini Awakening,
Of
2018.
course.
So,
Of course.
um, a month after I turned 27, I was visited in a dream by the singer Prince,
Right.
whose symbol is here. He is one of my spirit guides, and he was my favorite singer. I have him tattooed on my body. My ex-boyfriend in 2012 was obsessed with him. That's what brought us together, was Prince.
Right.
And I just thought I was a fan. I didn't know where it was all going to lead. Okay.
Right.
I just loved Prince because he was Gemini. He embodied the masculine and feminine. And
Right.
I've loved
And
him
did it
since I was
well, right?
very well. And I've
Yep.
loved him since I was a little kid. When I saw him in that yellow outfit with the butt cheeks cut out. And I
Right.
remember asking my mom, what is that? And she goes, who is that? That
Mhm.
is Prince. And she was like defensive about it because she loved
Right.
him. And so I remember from that point forward being like, a guy can look like that? He's just doing whatever he wants. It was so
Right.
inspiring. He is my favorite artist and my most favorite spirit guide, and he's very connected to Saint Germain and many star seed or star systems and Yeshua. Yeshua and Jesus is all up in his music. I Would Die for You is about Jesus.
Really.
And so, and Purple Rain is about the violet flame. So there's a lot of things that I've come to know now. But when he came to me, it was August of 2018, a couple months after my birthday. And I remember being like, that was so real. And I remember it feeling like a visitation. I even told my dad about it. And it was this whole thing. Well, 2 months later, I am at work, working on music on a break on my
Mhm.
computer. And out of nowhere, I felt this energy come into my body and just this heat take over my body. And that's when it began. September 28th, 2018. Was I already spiritual? Hell yeah, for years, since I was 16, 17, been going
Right.
through all these things, chakra openings, seeing spirits, giving people readings at work and not meaning to. I mean, this has been going on for years. It was that moment though that I didn't sleep for 21 days until October 19th, 2018 is when I slept for the first time. And I didn't even know that was possible.
Right.
And that was when all the ascension symptoms started. And I convinced myself I had cancer, Epstein-Barr virus. I mean, just everything. I was drinking so much celery juice. I can't tell you how scared I was. And what
Right.
the Kundalini awakening did and what that initiation was a major opening for me. And it brought up all the past life stuff, all the different densities, all the issues, and the amount of ascension symptoms. When we've worked together before and I've told you about these ascension symptoms
Right.
and how to move through them or what to expect, or I knew what the hell I was talking about because I
Right.
was forced into it. And so
Right.
a couple weeks into it, I remember laying in the bed shaking, having kriyas, which are these involuntary muscle spasms and jerks when the kundalini's moving around your body. I was doing
Right.
weird things with my voice. And I remember looking up at the ceiling and asking God, source. I never ever call it God just because it has a religious connotation, and
What were
I'm
you
not.
calling it then, though?
Source,
Source.
source, spirit. I said out loud, spirit,
Right.
can you, if you help me, please help me, because if you do, and I live my life and I love myself again and I don't kill myself, because the moment Kundalini started, I wanted to kill myself, which is a
Right.
typical side effect of the Kundalini energy. When
Yeah.
you have an ego death, your ego can be like, I guess we're dying. Let's kill ourselves. There can be all
Right.
kinds of negative things
Right.
that happen. So I was fighting suicidal thoughts and I said, if I survive this, if I make it through, because I honestly thought I was never going to sleep again, that I was going to have to kill myself to end it.
To get out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, if I get out of this, I swear on everything, I will help others. I will help others who are going through this. I will help. Little did I know the path they were going to send me down
Right.
from that point, but I am honored to do that and I am going to uphold my end of the bargain because I love my life now. And it took a long time to get here. but I don't feel that darkness. I don't feel that density. I don't feel um, the weight or the emptiness that comes with the dark night of the soul. Like,
Right.
I feel like I can handle anything now that I've been through these things. And what happened after Kundalini was even darker than anything I had experienced before.
Right.
But it's because it's bringing it all up.
Mm.
Source Kundalini, they do not care about morals and ethics here on our planet. Okay, they don't care
Right.
what you think. Sometimes when you go through Kundalini awakening, when it gets into your sacral and it's clearing things, I was seeing flowers bloom and it was turning me on.
Right.
I didn't understand this. I would see pictures of orchids and it would turn me on. It was this weird, like, recalibration of sexual energy to the heart, but I didn't know that then. I thought I was just going insane.
Right. Yeah.
I thought I'm fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Something's wrong.
how did I was teaching astrology and loving my life and making music and talking about law of attraction, and you all are going to make me fucked up and
Right. This
schizophrenic and
weirdo that's
evil
having all
and
these
weird
weird
and
things. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
why? I just was like, why? So I eventually found a couple days later, someone said, you have to go see this woman in southern Indiana, which was 30 minutes away from me. She is a healer. Her name is Penny Sisto. Ooh, I hope it's okay that I put her name on here. She's
Yeah. Of course.
sacred being, and I do not want people knocking down her door to get to her. She is a famous quilt artist. She makes these incredible quilts by hand. She was 77 when I saw her. Um, and when I saw her, she really helped me. Whatever she did on me, which was very strange, very Celtic, like Native American and Celtic shaman mixed together. I remember after she did what she did, that feeling in my solar plexus that had felt where the panic would strike. I was having
Right.
panic, that feeling of panic, like every 5 to 15 seconds for 21 days,
Right.
and a rush of chemicals would come with it. And that feeling was gone, and it felt too good to be true. And that's when she looked at me and said, "We need to talk." And I took the silk off my face that she put over my face when I was lying down, and I looked at her and I said, "What the fuck is happening to me?
Right.
What is happening to me?"
Right.
She goes, "Do you know what an empath is?" And I was like, "It's someone who can feel what other people are feeling." And she goes, "Oh." An empath is someone who can absorb what other people are feeling into their body. And
Right.
she said, "You're going through something and you're never going to be the same after this. And you have taken on other people's energy and their hatred of you too, and
Mm.
into your body. And I've cleared that from you. But what you're going through, I cannot help you going forward. It is only you and your soul." She said, "The only thing I can say is clear your energy every day, get a dark stone to wear around your neck." And I was like, "Well, I already do those things." And she goes, "Keep doing them. But now
Right.
you need to own that you are an empath. You are a transmuter of energy." And I looked at her and said, "I don't want to be an empath."
Right.
She goes, "You have been an empath in every incarnation you've ever had,
Right.
even the ones that you would call evil. You
Right.
were an empath." How strange to think of that.
Right.
And because even an empath can absorb someone else's hatred so they can think it's their own and act on that. I mean, that really
Exactly.
opened me up. And from, I would say about 3 months later, I was making an album at the time. And so I was planning to move to Atlanta. Well, that was sort of in the future. 3 months after that, after still battling an emptiness and a suicidal ideation, I woke up one day in early January of 2019, and it felt like someone was pulling me with a string. I
Mm.
woke up. It was 8 in the morning, and I am not a morning person, and I had energy. I felt joy. And it was the first time in months and months and months that I felt positive emotion, like
Wow.
true joy and hope or warmth
Right. Yeah. Light.
that I wasn't searching for.
Yeah.
And so I decided, well, I'm going to go on a hike, which I hadn't done in months. And it was cold and rainy. And I said, I'm going to get out in nature. I'm going to go on a hike. And I remember listening to a documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know?
Right.
And it was on Gaia, and it was talking about the law of attraction and how you create your reality. It was talking about many things, and it was giving me hope. And then I found myself to another book, and that day was the day that I decided to move to Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta a few weeks later. I had a job, I had a house, I had everything lined up. And as I was moving, um, I remember locking myself out of the U-Haul before I drove to Atlanta and being like, what the fuck? And so I had to call an Uber driver to get me to go find my other key somewhere to bring me back.
Right.
So the Uber driver and I are on our way. And as we get closer to the location that I'm being dropped off at, I felt this strange, because of the way she was talking, the way she was being, the way she made me feel, I felt this strange desire to tell her that she was an empath.
Hmm.
You know when you're first on your path and you first
Right.
awakened and you're like, I'm gonna go tell everyone they're an empath.
Right.
But I also felt called to because of how sweet and how much I could feel she was helping me with my energy. It was
Yeah.
interesting. So she stops the car and she said, "It was really nice talking to you." And I said, "Before I go, I just want you to know, do you know that you're an empath?" She looked at me in the rear view mirror and she goes, "Do you know that you're a slider?"
Oh.
And I said, "What's that?" And she goes, "It's
Right.
someone who can make streetlights go out. Have a good day."
Wow. Yeah.
I didn't get out. And she said, "Do you," she goes, and so she unlocked the door again. She goes, "Are you having trouble getting out?" And I was just like,
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere now.
well, I got out because I was freaked out.
Were
And
you?
I did. I was freaked out. I was like, what the hell? No one knows about that. I've been telling my mom about the street lights for years, and they're all
Right.
telling me it's a coincidence. And so I looked up sliders after that
Yeah.
and found this whole community of people who were like, when I'm in a highly emotional state and I look at streetlights, they go out. And I'm like, oh my God, I always notice that I'm either really upset or really excited when it happens.
Right.
And that sometimes it's when I look directly at it, it will go out.
Hmm.
And I felt so seen and understood. And I was like, was that an angel driving that Uber? Was that
Right.
spirit working through her? Is that why I locked myself out of that U-Haul?
Right. Right.
Whoa, look how spirit is so, look at the way the universe works.
Right.
And then I got into that U-Haul and started driving, and I heard a voice and it said, "You're not moving to Atlanta for music." And I remember saying, "Well, then what am I moving to Atlanta for?" And it said
Right.
spirituality. And I was like, okay, let's see what that means. A week after moving to Atlanta and starting my job, I found a metaphysical center. I went to all of them, and there was a class, and it was a Wednesday class, Mediumship 101. So I went to meet people. That's all. I just
Right.
went to meet people and to have a class. And the teacher, um, I am going on and on, Jody. Is this okay?
No, this I'm enjoying it. I'm sure everybody's enjoying
A
it.
couple times my Gemini brain has been like, she's not getting a word in. I just want to
No,
make
this
sure
is
that
good. I'm following
that
along.
the audience isn't just like, my God, it's just he just keeps going. Gemini can keep going, you all. Just know it's a never-ending talk fest
Well,
over
we're
here.
getting to some interesting stuff. So
I
let's
do
yeah.
need I want people to feel understood because a lot of people listening are going to go, "Oh my God, that's me." And so I
All
do
right.
want to lay the foundation, but I also want to check in. Um, but I remember going to that class and there was an odd number. And so when the teacher was explaining, her name is Andrea, and we became friends after because I went and worked for that metaphysical center a couple months later. Okay,
Right.
so she told me that, or she said to the class, we're all going to partner up in groups, and then there was an odd number, so I immediately said to her, I'm going to be with you
Right.
because I thought if I'm going to learn something here, let's
You're gonna
partner
be
up with
with
the
the
teacher.
teacher. Yeah.
And she said, we're just doing an exercise. It's not mediumship. We're just playing a game. And so I said, I'm going to partner up with you. And she goes, well, I'm not giving you the reading. And I was like, I know, but I'll give you the reading.
Right.
And so the whole point was to make up a story. The person across from you is supposed to give you a name. And from that name, you're supposed to close your eyes and just imagine a story surrounding that name. You and I know exactly what she was doing.
Oh, for
She was
sure.
opening up our intuition on the right side
Right.
by not making our ego think we need to give a good reading. And
Right.
even
Yeah.
though I knew that deep down, I did the exercise still. I bypassed my ego, and she looked at me. She goes, "Ready?" And she said, "Mary." And so I closed my eyes and I started to describe what I see and it saw, and it just kept going. And I've done this before with many people, but it
Right.
was never on this. It would always just happen, or I would
Right.
be drunk at a club or something. Your
Right.
grandmother's telling me, and I wouldn't
Right.
remember it the next day. Um, I opened my eyes when I was done, and she was crying, and she goes, "That's my mother, and no medium I've been to has been able to contact her."
Oh.
And then she pulled me aside after the class and she goes, "You are a medium. you need to take my class. Like, you have to come here. You are a gifted medium.
Right.
My ego was like, fuck her. She's trying to get me to take her course. She's just lying
Really.
to me. I'm not doing this.
Right.
So after that, though, after she said that, it was like she gave my mediumship abilities permission to fully open,
Right.
because from that point forward, it was every day something was happening, and I was having the courage to say it finally to people.
Yeah.
Um, what about this woman I'm seeing that looks like this? Oh my God, that's my aunt. And I would be like, I am really doing this. I started getting the names. I started being like, wow, this is really happening.
Right.
And then I went to her and said, okay, I didn't believe you at first, and now I believe you. And she said, you're going to charge people for this one day. And I said, no, the hell I'm not. I could never just perform this for someone, especially for money. What if I don't get anything? 6 months later, I started charging people. And needless to say, I became what everyone knew as the astro medium, because in
Right.
2020, I started my business because I remember one of my associates running up to me and said, oh my God, I'm really afraid. Have you heard about this virus that's breaking out? And I remember hearing, it's not real,
Mm.
in my head.
Right.
And my aunt passed away of complications of COVID in 2021. So I'm
Right.
not saying to anyone that COVID isn't real and you're making it up, and the people who have passed away, it's all, I don't want to invalidate anyone. But what I heard at that moment was, it's not real.
Right.
And so in my reality, I understood, even when I tried to get the vaccine, I would hear turn around. I followed that. Okay. And that's my journey. Okay.
Right.
Not judging anyone else.
Right.
Um, but I remember at that moment being like, none of this is real. And when we all went into quarantine, I went into a dark space. I was feeling the collective. And
Hmm.
then after, when we came out of that, I was like, I'm going to charge people on my own website. I'm not just going to work for this metaphysical center. I'm going to make a
Yeah.
website. So I made
Right.
christophermedium.com and started charging people, like $60 for an hour. Oh, gosh, I did not know how to charge back then.
Right.
I did not know my worth back then. I didn't know
Right.
anyone would book. And I was getting, my days off were filled. I would have 8 readings a day. It would wear me out. It made me
Of
almost
course, at
hate
that
it
price. Yeah.
at that price. Yes. And the people would come and be like, is my grandmother in heaven or hell? And so I'm like, we
Right.
got to charge more just to keep those people from coming, because it
Right.
it wears you out when you're not
Oh
actually
yeah.
able to heal anyone. You're just
Right.
talking to
You become a
skeptics, or
circus performer.
ugh, I was
Right.
not a fortune teller. I would tell
Right.
them,
Right.
they would be like, I don't want to talk about what I need to heal. I want to talk to my granny. And I was like, well, she's not talking, and they're only talking about your trauma.
Right.
So I realized then that I'm actually a healer.
Right.
And what I haven't shared with everyone is, from the time I was 20 until now, I've been working with plant medicine. It
Right.
started with ayahuasca, but when I was 24, 25, I started hosting psilocybin gatherings in my apartment. I would design the music soundscape. I would put out art supplies. I have pictures of it on my website. All the drawings that my friends would do around the table, and I would channel things. Because back
And
then,
for those who don't know that is, what is that?
psilocybin mushrooms,
Okay.
or magic mushrooms.
Okay.
And that was the second medicine that I worked, well, third if you count cannabis, and fourth if you count chocolate being cacao. But all these medicines that I now work with showed up at some point in my time, and psilocybin mushrooms are incredible gift to planet Earth and to humanity. And as you can see, and I really felt called to host these gatherings. I would channel things. I would bring things through. All the friends, we were all into Bashar and Law of Attraction. I was always that friend that corralled everyone and was like, let's talk
Right.
about astrology and
Me too.
Bashar. And
Yeah. Me too.
and they loved it. They ate it up. It wasn't like I was forcing it. Um, and so I had really beautiful experiences with medicine as well. But in 2018, I took 9 grams of fresh mushrooms, which I
Oh my
shouldn't have
goodness.
done, and I had what many people call a bad trip. And it wouldn't
Right.
have been a bad trip had there been a shaman or a healer, a space holder present. But there were supposed to be 5 of us, and only 3 of us showed up. So I took the other two's dose, and the other two took their regular dose. What a
Right.
fool! Okay. But I thought, I've worked with these for a long time. I trust it. And it still was a beautiful experience. It's just no one
Right.
was holding the space. So I got really frightened.
Right.
Um, and so in that journey, I saw myself killing myself many times. My dad was screaming at me and beating me. I was seeing child abuse happening. It was so dark. I was not understanding what was happening. And it laid the groundwork. It was almost like it was showing me all the themes that I was going to work on in my healing process.
Right.
Duh, because I was only taking smaller amounts of psilocybin up to that point, no more than 2 grams, because I was channeling things. I wanted to be more lucid. And psilocybin to me was a way to connect to spirit and to connect our hearts together and have an incredible spiritual time with your friends.
Mm.
I didn't look at psilocybin mushrooms the way I looked at ayahuasca at the time. I just looked
Mm.
at them as different. I didn't realize that they have the same power in them that grandmother
Right.
ayahuasca has
Right.
to reveal the truths of your soul and to activate your DNA. I didn't understand that yet.
Mm.
I reserved that for Wachuma the grandfather and grandmother ayahuasca, those more um, shamanic medicines that you'll find in indigenous ceremonies around the
Right.
world,
Right.
iboga in Africa, things like that. I really was totally shifted by that experience. And then I went through Kundalini Awakening 6 months later, and then I moved to Atlanta. So it's just been this leading up to this point. And so then I started my Instagram in late 2020. And I was like, I don't know what to call it. I'm a medium and I'm an astrologer. Let's call it the astro medium, because
Right.
when I do my astrology readings, they turn into mediumship readings. And when I do mediumship readings, I always say, can I pull up your chart and see where this is coming from? So
Right.
then I made it a thing.
Right.
And so my whole work was centered around mediumship and psychic work and doing readings, and also astrological updates and energy updates, because knew I was an authority based on my initiation and activation on ascension and ascension symptoms and that sort of thing. So I started posting what I was feeling happening in the collective, and that really took off. But underneath of all of that, from 2019 to 2020, I started working with a medicine group and or a lineage of plant medicine, and they did medicine differently. They had many medicines. It wasn't just psilocybin. It wasn't just an ayahuasca ceremony. They had capsules of things. They had ayahuasca and psilocybin mixed together in chocolates. And I was having incredible experiences with it, because, of course, you can't fake the medicines. But there were other things in those capsules that weren't supposed to be there. And ayahuasca told me it was a cult when I was
Mm.
journeying one night with them. But I just didn't understand how to wrap my head around that. And I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but I did see someone in those experiences, a couple people and other people who are clients of mine now, see some shape shifting reptilian like things going on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I had my first taste in what the reptilian agenda and the archonic agenda are doing. They infiltrated the Vatican thousands of years ago. I shouldn't say infiltrated the Vatican, they created it. Um, but they have infiltrated all these different systems, like plant medicine that's supposed to open you up. It's so beautiful, connect with your higher self.
Right.
So there are reptilians and there are beings that have infiltrated the plant medicine world as well, not only to create confusion, but to instead heal, cause more trauma.
And so were
Okay.
you aware of all of that coming into that, or like that experience happened for you and then that whole other thing opened up for you to see?
It was Then it opened me up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard about David Icke and his reptilian theory when I was 21, and I just
Right.
thought he was crazy.
Right.
When people are like, satanic ritual cults run the planet. I was like, my ex-boyfriend even used to tell me, he would be like, Aaliyah was a blood sacrifice and she was killed on purpose. And I would be like, will you get over yourself?
Right.
He was right. He knew what he was talking about.
Right.
But
Right.
also, he is someone who identifies more with the dark side,
Right.
and he
Right.
really likes it, even though he's just a little boy inside.
Mhm.
Most of them are just little boys inside in suits.
Right. Yeah.
He's a little boy. So that dark made him feel powerful, that
Right.
Scorpio
Yeah.
sun. When it's not in its highest expression, it really wants power and control and for you to be
Right.
afraid of it. So he was just using all of that, I believe. Could there have been satanic and demonic influences? Absolutely. But I was like, at that time, I didn't have enough experience to understand. I knew that demons weren't the same as angels. I knew
Right. Right.
that
Yeah.
there's no way that God made everything and that he's that he is allowing this to continue. I understood that they're projections. If they exist, they're a thought form. They're not as powerful as an angel. They're fourth dimensional. I finally got all that language as I got older and continued to
Right.
grow and accept and experience more teachings and downloads. And a lot of this I got in my own medicine ceremonies and meditations. There are things that I thought were my own idea that I found on the internet somewhere else, and it
Yeah,
verified
the
them for me.
validation of it, right?
I didn't just read all these things,
Right.
okay? I
Right.
downloaded them in dreams and in
Right.
medicine ceremonies, and I get names sometimes, and I'm like, "What is Akhenaten?" You know, that's a name that has come up for me recently,
Mhm.
and I now have a little bit more clarity around it. Well, I didn't know who he was, so I know
Right.
that it's not coming from out here,
Right.
because sometimes when it comes from within and you get it validated out here,
Yeah.
not sometimes, all the times, you trust yourself so
Well,
much
it's
more.
interesting that you say it like that because my husband and I were just having this conversation about how, when you're listening to people talk and they're sharing their journeys and their experiences and the teachings of everything, I'm always like, well, where did they get their information from? Where did that information come from? And I was telling Tom today that Chris and I were going to be talking again today. And I said, the cool thing about talking with Chris for me is that he is a medium. And so when we use that word medium, to me, I fully understand it because we're channelers. We're able to bring in and for those of who think, well, who's your source? Are you getting it from demonic? Well, as somebody who's an empath, we are also extremely sensitive to energy. So we can tell when energy is flowing through and information is flowing through. We can tell whether it's coming from a light source or a dark source.
Yeah, I would say most of the time, and in as long as we're in our heart,
Right.
are there distortions that are happening? Are there veils? Are there programs and AI programs running? Negative alien agenda programs running? I believe so. And if I'm never sure, I'll even ask my pendulum if my ego's
Right.
too involved in it, because I don't want reptilians to run the planet. My ego didn't want that. So sometimes I had to ask the pendulum or go to another reader or
Right.
have my own experience. I've seen someone's face, I've seen their nose melt down into slits and their mouth turn like this and reptile print form around their eyes. I can't unsee that.
Right.
And
Right.
then when someone who was also there that night comes up to me a year later and says, I have to tell you about what I saw. I saw her face turn into a reptile. I was like, whoa, that
Right.
wasn't just me. And if that was a group psychosis, hysteria that happened, it was really, really specific and good,
Mm-hmm.
especially because the two of us who saw it come from the same star family. And we had
Right.
already had that realization that we were brother and sister. So, of course, we were seeing the same thing that night, and she
Right.
didn't tell me
Right.
for a year. So, but I also have to say this for anyone who's now going, oh God, he's going into the reptilian thing. Now I've got to check out because I need my crystals and my sage, and I just want to talk about ascension and light.
Right.
Well,
Right.
it is in our best interest to also have compassion for these reptilian beings because reptilian beings are beautiful. There's so many all across the galaxy and in the universe, just like insectoids and fish beings and humanoids. So many beautiful beings out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the reptilian, the draconians and the reptilians that are in charge of the satanic cults on the planet and the Saturnian satanic programs, they are also being siphoned and possessed, if you will, but sort of infiltrated by archonic forces. So it is in your most Christ like, Christ consciousness self to show them compassion as well. And I did not. When I saw her face turn into a reptile, my ego immediately went, this is several years ago. Oh my God, David Icke was right. Oh my God, the
Right. Right.
reptilians, there are reptilians. And
Right.
I needed to realize like many of the reptilians that we would associate with being bad, many of them have even come to the side of not light, I'm going to call it love, come to the
Right.
side of love or wanting positivity or wanting to grow with humanity because we live in a false matrix and we're living, how do I say this? We live in sort of a prison planet that was originally supposed to be a Garden of Eden. It's a beautiful paradise and a place for energies to grow and flourish and for you to come master and become an ascended master. However, this false matrix was put into place, and it has to do with the Saturn moon matrix. So, for anyone listening, if you're really attached to the moon and you're triggered by the idea that the moon is hollow and metal and has, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Not atomic. What's the other explosive? There's atomic bombs, and then there's the other kind of bomb. I don't know why that word is leaving me, but this type of technology, that quantum computers and basically devices inside of the moon. If that sort of stuff sounds too weird, check out Right Now. If you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he would talk so badly about my mama moon, my mother moon.
It was
Just
nuclear. You were thinking about
nuclear, thank you, nuclear devices in the moon.
yes.
I almost said neutrinos several times,
No,
and I was
I
like, that's not the right word, even though
right.
neutrinos have something to do with the program that's running and how they're able to mind control us. Um, I
Well, I'm glad you've gone here because that of course Tom gave me some questions to ask you because he
Sure.
did hear our our first conversation and was like, I need to like ask him some of these questions. And so he's saying he wants you to ask, do we create our own reality or is that a part of the matrix? Now, since you're talking about the matrix, right? And I love this because when we listen to Chris's story, like the backstory, for somebody who loves you know people's stories and energy and watching, as I followed Chris's story along the path, I could see this whole all the pieces coming together and being like, okay, well, this is why, right, all that comes together. And so of course it makes sense that you part of your stop on the journey was the whole Abraham Hicks and all of
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, of
Because you need
course.
to be able to see all of it and see through it all. So
And
from where
foundational
you are
pieces.
now, tell us what your feelings are about it being, do we create our own reality or is this part of the matrix?
We do create our own reality, and we create our individual reality and a collective reality. The false matrix is a creation of ours. It is influenced by the archons, but we are the
And
ones
Chris, tell me,
creating it.
I was saying to Chris today, so the archons, I had never even heard that word before, right? I like honestly, I may sound daft for coming out and
You are
saying
not.
that.
This is very niche information, and a lot of it hidden on purpose.
Is it? Okay. Because part of also like my, spirit's always saying to me that I am what they call a hollow bone. And I don't know if you've heard
Yes. Yes,
that.
I have. That's a Native American term.
Yeah. And so part of that is like they keep a lot of things out of my peripheral. They, the information that comes in at very precise timing so that
Yes.
I'm ready
Yes.
for it. So I don't create a bias about it, right?
That has been the same for me too.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, why didn't I know about this 7 years
Right.
ago?
Right.
Because my ego would have done things with that information that would
Right.
have filtered some information coming through the wrong way.
Right. Yes.
Like as a medium who doesn't judge people, I've had people come through in readings who've done horrible things. I've had a woman who was sexually assaulted and almost killed by a man who killed himself after she
Right.
reported him. Well, he
Yeah.
came through in a reading and it really triggered her and she didn't like it.
Right.
He's not in hell. I don't know what to tell you. That story doesn't isn't
Right.
true. Like
Right. Right.
he might reincarnate and become a famous healer who helps the
Right.
entire world. You just
Right.
don't know
Right.
what kind of soul agreement. And that doesn't mean that I'm saying what he did was correct or I like it. I'm saying
Right.
you don't have all the answers to what's right and
Yeah, I've
wrong.
had the same experiences where a murderer comes through and you're like expecting him to feel like dark and crazy and scary,
And it
but you're like, how
wasn't.
come he feels so light and like full of
Yes.
love?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
because his human brain is in the ground somewhere or was
exactly.
incinerated. So we have to understand there's programming that happens within the matrix. So when someone says, do we create our own reality? Yes. Can the archons create reality? No.
And so tell the others who may not know, who are the archons?
So the archons are actually mentioned in a Prince song called Seven. If any Prince
Oh,
fans are
that's
out
an,
there,
I'm gonna have to go and listen to some Prince tonight for sure.
all seven, and we'll watch them fall. He's talking about the seven deadly sins or the seven archons, and how, if you listen to that, he says, I am yours now, and you are mine, and I'm trying to remember the words. Together we'll love through all space and time, so don't cry. One day all seven will die. He's talking about us ascending
Mm,
and mastering this archonic force that could be called the seven deadly sins,
right.
but really in the Gnostic text, Gnostic, Gnostic, this was the original Christianity before the Roman Catholic in not invasion, but sort of takeover of religion and Christianity, where
And
they
so who
sort of
wrote that? Who's supposed to be the writers of that?
the Essenes, I'm pretty sure, Essene, Essenes. These are people who worked closely with the Yeshua figure, Mary Magdalene. Um,
Okay.
the, the Gnostic texts talk about Jesus as more of a prophet, more
Hmm.
like a Buddha or someone who
A
came to help.
healer, an energy
There was
worker.
no,
Yeah.
yes, the
Yeah.
idea of the Jesus dying on the cross came from Horus, the sun god in Egypt.
Okay.
Um, Horus was born of a virgin birth, Isis, on December 25th, 3 days on the fourth day after the winter equinox. And that rise in the sun was celebrated on the spring equinox, which we call Easter. The Bible, as we know it, is an astrological, plagiarized hybrid of many different stories and myths. It's like Mithra of Persia was born of a virgin birth on December 25th, had 12 disciples. 12 is the sacred number of creation. The 13th energy is Jesus, or the one in the center, the sun, and the
Mhm.
Son of God. The crown of thorns are his sun rays. Like it's Horus. Horus was the sun god. Now, there was Yeshua, who was actually a star seed who came here from a future timeline to help us to restore the Christos or Christ consciousness. I spell it Chryst.
Right.
Christ means the anointed one. And so, what Yeshua really was teaching was that we are all anointed ones. And
Mm,
so, there is no anointed one or only one son. And
right.
so, Chryst is Christ consciousness. It's not this man who died on a cross, it's the
Right.
actual 5D consciousness of the heart grid. And so, there's a lot of distortion in all of that. And when you get into like the religion and the Gnostic texts before Christianity, because that was the original Christianity was the Gnostic texts. They describe the mother goddess, the creator of everything, and they call her
Mm,
Sophia. And it's a Sophionic consciousness, is what they call it, the mother goddess. And the mother goddess had a child, and this child was evil and monstrous and turned its back on his own mother, and they called it the demiurge, which is the inspiration for the creatures in the show Stranger Things, the demigorgons. They got a
okay.
lot of that from these ancient stories and myths and Gnostic texts. Well, the Gnostic texts also talk about the seven archons, and the archons, they also describe them as reptilian because the Gnostics were exposed to these reptilian beings who took over the planet in the false matrix 12,500 years ago when we had the Great Flood and the drop in consciousness from 5D to 3D, and
Okay.
the introduction of the false matrix when they brought the moon into our orbit to lock us in with these beings. The archons were described as reptilian, but I think the Gnostics were dealing with reptilian beings, and they were feeling the archonic energy in those reptoids.
Right.
But what the archons actually are, they are not demons. They don't exist in the fourth dimension. Demons are a fourth dimensional astral duality state projection energy. They're a thought form. These beings actually existed in a parallel universe, if you will, sort of a void space, which there's all kinds of different corners and caverns and little pockets in
Right.
in
Right.
the multiverse of existence. And so they vibrate in a very low frequency, which is not bad. There's nothing wrong with 900 FM just because you're on 104 FM. That doesn't
Right.
mean what's down here is bad. It's just lower. It's
Right.
density.
Right.
So the archons are a mind parasite because they cannot create reality. They have cut themselves off completely from source. I don't know how you do that, but
Mm,
sometimes leaves on the tree of source can fall off.
Right.
Are they still the tree? Yes, they always will be. They came from the tree. But
Right.
source is so grand and so vast and so magnanimous that there are even aspects of source that can believe that it's not source.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
I'm not source. We are gods. Like the archons believe they're God.
Right.
And
And so what form do they show up in? Like what are
so many people see it as a sort of squid like energy with tentacles, almost like an octopus. And
okay.
it's usually black, not because black is evil, but because black is dense and it
Right. Right.
absorbs light.
Right.
Okay, which is why you don't wear black to the beach.
Right.
So it's just absorbing light. People think, oh, absorbing light and eating light, that's evil. Well, go call a black hole evil. Go call the atomic structure in your body evil because you have black holes on the inside of your atoms. You are
Right.
trillions of black holes. Are you evil because you absorb light?
Right.
Like, it's part of the universe, the inhale and the exhale, especially down here in the physical dimensions where we experience duality.
Right.
So the archons can be seen in many ways, but many people, even assistants of mine, when we do our shamanic activations and we call forth the reptilian consciousness to send love at it, and we are talking about the archons, my assistant was like, I keep seeing in some of their chakras this like squid, black, inky looking thing. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's the archons. That's how they describe seeing them. And it's almost like there are seven tentacles that come off of that archon or something, and that
Right.
may be
Right.
why they call them the seven
So very
archons.
much like a parasite though, like an
Very much
actual
like a
parasite.
parasite. And
Yeah.
let's be very clear, a parasite needs a host,
Yes.
okay, so that it can feed. Would you pull a tapeworm out of your body and be like, "This is pure evil"? It's
No.
it's just an organism, you all,
Right.
okay?
Right.
So does it do what you would call evil things? Sure, if you're assigning that name to some of the things, it the archons and the program that is running does things that I don't want to be a part of. Does that mean that it's evil and that the devil did it and that God has nothing to do with it and God wants to stop it? God would just stop it. Source would just stop it. And I'm going to stop using the word God as much because I don't want people to think of the Abrahamic God of religion that I'm talking about.
Right. Right.
And also, it kind of gives a male energy when I say God. And I don't
Right.
want to give that perception either because it is both.
Hmm.
It is yin and yang. So, source, it's there because it exists, and free will. You have free will. There's beings of all kinds out there, and there are parasites. There are beautiful angelic beings. There's all the whole spectrum. If you exist in the dense duality realities, you're going to experience the whole spectrum because everything in the upper dimensions before it densifies and comes into 3D must pass through the fourth dimension.
Right.
The fourth dimension is the collective mind state of any being or collective consciousness. And that's where we go when we dream in the astral. Before something in the eighth, seventh, sixth, fifth, as it's densifying down, if you will, it splits into a duality. This is proven by quantum physics in the mirror effect. Well, you know that the mirror is a reflection of you, but when you raise your right hand, it's your mirror reflection's left hand.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Spears just saying the micro and the macro, right?
yes, the
That's
micro and the macro, as above,
yeah.
so below, as within, so without. And so that's where, as an astrologer, I have been pulled to ascend astrology as well, because the 12 zodiacal energies is a program. It can be used as a program because it's
Right.
zeros and ones code. So you have your sacred triad, your Father, Son, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to look at, Parama, Shakti, and Shiva, or Shiva, whatever you want to imagine that triad as. The grand triad is the energy that is true. That's the code and the source consciousness. Well, as we densify and as cells do in our body, they mirror and replicate. Well, that
Hmm.
three turns into six. So now you have six archetypal energies. Six, six, six. Are we on the same page
Following.
here?
Yeah.
We're starting to
Following
get
the story.
there.
Yeah.
Now, what we do is we split them even more into a duality even further. Now you have Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio. They're the same energy. Aries, I am. Libra, we are. Isn't that the same? It's just two ends of the Q tip.
Right. Yeah.
We're still talking about a self. Are we talking about selves or self? Because I thought we were all God. So when we say
Right.
we, we're actually talking about I.
Right.
Okay. And Scorpio is I release, Taurus, I have, Virgo, in the body, Pisces, return to spirit. They're the same energy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
come to the 0 point field, in the center of that polarity is
Mm-hmm.
where the truth is. The 0 point field, your neutral state, the center. What's in the center of that zodiac? The 13th house, the 13th sign. And so 13, 7 and 13 are two numbers that have followed me my entire life. If you asked me when I was a kid what my favorite number was, it was 13.
Right.
And if you asked me why, it's because everyone dislikes it, so I love it. That was
Right.
the only reason I had back then. Every album I've ever created had either 7 songs or 13 songs on it,
Right.
every single
Right.
time. My music group, before I moved to Atlanta, me and my partner who were making music, the group was called Coven, Covyn, because we were
Right.
like a new kind of witch. And there were 13 songs on that album. So
Right.
even my first album I wrote at 19 had 7 songs. And the first song was called 13th Street, which was this place in my mind that I would go, which was a fantasy land. And I didn't understand it until 2018 when I bought my first Metatron's Cube necklace.
Right.
And I told my friend, I was like, this is our pentagram. This will be our pentagram for our coven, And I loved the shape. I didn't understand
Right.
totally who Metatron was, but I had had this symbol and understood sacred geometry for years.
Yeah.
But I was like, hmm, there aren't 12. If Metatron's cube represents the creation and kind of an atomic structure, because
Mm-hmm.
that is the flattened version, but the 3D version is an
Right.
entire structure. Those circles are actually spheres. And I remember saying to my friend, I was like, how come they say 12 is the number of creation when there are 13 spheres in Metatron's cube?
Right. Right.
There's the one in the
What?
center,
Right.
the 0 point field. So what I had to do was go, astrology is a false matrix program.
Right.
Not the organic astrology, but tropical astrology. Astrology as we know it today was created after the false matrix was implemented and abides by the rules of those binary codes. And
Right.
also the energy of the tropical zodiac. Like right now, the sun is not in Sagittarius. In the sun is in alignment with the constellation of Scorpio, or technically, um, well, it will be Ophiuchus, but Scorpio right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you looked into the night sky, the sun is in alignment with Scorpio, the constellation, not Sagittarius. We start the zodiac on March 21st, but on March 21st, the sun is in alignment with the constellation of Pisces because every 25,000 years, the organic zodiac and the tropical false matrix zodiac will
They
line up.
line up. Right. Yeah.
But that's called a platonic year. And
Right.
that allows that breakup, actually kind of like a Rubik's cube, allows light in. It
Mm-hmm.
allows you more free
It's like
will,
a
actually.
reset. It's a
Yes,
reset
there's a
time.
reset that happens. And we know that through the age of Aquarius, the age of
Yeah.
Pisces, these 2100-year cycles. So I had to realize, whoa, I'm an astrologer, I'm teaching astrology correctly, but I'm teaching false matrix astrology. So I
Right.
had to ascend it. And
And so,
so
Chris, when is there like an actual like time that the false matrix was created or
yes,
implemented or
yes.
okay.
This was around 12,500 years ago, 13,000 years ago. Um, there's some beings that just stepped forward. So it took upward towards 100 years for the false matrix to fully envelop or encode itself. And that has a lot to do with the genetic hybridization programs because we have a 12-stranded DNA.
Right.
There's that number 12 again. There's nothing wrong with the number 12. It's just, remember, there are 12 spheres around here. I'm going to go get that real quick just for people watching.
Okay. Yeah, he's just going to go and grab his Metatron symbol. I've got my little mini guy here as well. You can see with the
Oh, beautiful. There he is. Or
yeah.
there she is. I call these angels. They're two spirits.
Yes, for
They're
sure.
dual beings. There they are. Um, So you've got the 12 spheres around here: Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio, all leading toward the center. This is how my astrology chart would look. And here in the center is that center point. So the number 12 represents out here. The number 13 represents this.
That's
You can
interesting.
have the 12 around you, but who's the one viewing the 12? Who's the one talking
Right.
about the 12?
Right.
Who's the one pondering on the number 12?
Right.
That 13th energy.
Right.
Just like the 6. 7 is a step above 6, 13 is a step above or 12. So both of them tap you out of the matrix because
Right.
even numbers will keep you in a binary code. This 7 and 13 code actually helps you to remember and tap out or allow the probabilities. It's like a ping pong match. One person's going to win, one person's going to lose. But can you imagine playing ping pong and adding a third person?
Right.
The variables become way more, the potentials and the variables increase greatly. And so you
And does
have,
that become the like? So if we're talking about in mediumship lingo, the gap or the quantum
they
field.
said yes. I don't know what the gap is. I haven't heard that, but I heard yes. And I think we're both talking about the opening that takes place when
Hmm.
something doesn't always lock in with each other.
Hmm.
Like when something's like when that platonic year isn't locked in, there's space that's created in between the
Yeah.
two
And for me, it's
organisms.
it's that. So when I'm bringing through information and channeling information, it's that space, right? So the way you've kind of just been
Yeah.
showing, they've been showing me, it's like we've got that the 12 in every aspect all around us, and then the 13th is that space, that inner
Yeah.
space.
You are exactly right, because when people ask me, what is the 13th house? Is that Ophiuchus? Because Ophiuchus is technically the 13th sign. That's the one that we've heard about for years when people are like, your zodiac sign is wrong. It's been wrong the whole time.
Right.
There's a 13th zodiac sign. There actually is. It's called Ophiuchus, and the sun will enter the constellation of Ophiuchus on the 30th of November. And Ophiuchus,
So we're coming up to it.
yes, we are. And Ophiuchus, my Gaia sign is in Ophiuchus, because you have a sun sign and you also have a Gaia sign, or Earth. In ascended astrology, we also look at Gaia and her role in your astrological placement, because the moon is the stepmother that came in to take over the role of your mama Gaia. When people say Mother Moon, I'm like, you're standing on mama.
Right.
Why are
Right.
you giving the mother archetype to that inorganic metallic satellite?
Right. Right.
Why would you do that? Because it's a dark feminine program.
Right. Right.
So, my Gaia sign is in Ophiuchus and my sun is in Gemini, because in the 13 uh, constellations, it isn't, oppositions are really hard to create. Oppositions and squares, these hard angles, because the 13th energy knocks the whole thing off. This
That's
perfectly
interesting. Is that
split.
why I wonder? Because, the last couple of weeks intensely, but for a while, it's almost like things have been thrown off kilter. Like there's like a scrambling going on. Is that why, if like we're coming into that date on November 30th of coming into that 13th energy or into that, is that because something's going to be created from that? Something's coming out of there that even my husband's been saying, I can feel something big coming through.
It doesn't, I'm hearing yes, no, because they're responding to several things that you've said. What
Right.
it feels like after you've got done was, that yes, something big is coming. Yes, there's an energy. When you ask, is there an energy around this? Yes, there is. But what you all are exactly feeling is not related to the sun entering this sign.
Right.
What you are experiencing is something that's related more to how much closer we are to the galactic center than we were last year. And you're feeling a build up to 2027. I'm going to mention Pluto and Aquarius as well. You're
Right.
feeling some of those energies. The sun goes into Ophiuchus every year. So,
And does anything happen around that time though? Like, how the way they say there's a portal that opens up or there's a gateway that opens up. Is there anything that happens?
well, yes, the sun is imbued with that energy, just like it is every year. So, what happens when the sun is in Ophiuchus is not too different than when the sun is in Aries,
Like,
the
do we see
constellation.
any activity on the Schumann? Does the Schumann start
It's
spiking more? Do
not
we?
necessarily. No,
Oh,
it does
okay.
not directly related to that. So here's what I want everyone to understand is that there are three zodiacs in the ascended astrology chart. There is the organic constellational zodiac of the constellations out there, and they're all different sizes. They're not 30 degrees each.
Right,
So
right,
Ophiuchus is this small, Aries is this big. So the sun spends more time in Aries than it does Ophiuchus because they're not 30 degrees each, because they can't be if it's, excuse me, 30 degrees. They can't be if it's 13 energies. But even if they were all equal, um, they would all have to be like 27 degrees each, but they're all different sizes. So there is an energy. These constellations are actually beings. There are constellations everywhere. There's constellations above us. There's the constellation of the Big Dipper. They all have energy, and some of them are actually grouped into different celestial bodies.
right,
Different star systems actually make these different beings that we call these star, like the solar system that we're in. The planets are chakras in the solar system for the solar system. Well, the solar system is actually a chakra within inside the galaxy, but inside the galaxy is a chakra inside of a we're inside of these great celestial beings. We are them.
right,
They're not
right,
God. They're not greater than us. We're them.
right.
But from our perspective here in our earth plane and our solar system, these beings are spread out in different areas, but we're not directly in the center of them. So some of them look bigger from our angle than
Mm-hmm.
others. And it's these gatherings. It's like, what are these constellations? Did a bunch of people look up at the stars and say, let's group them together and call it something?
Right,
There was downloads coming through. There was ancient knowledge coming through. Astrology as we know it was bastardized, um, and was heavily messed with in the last 11, 12,000 years. And
right.
there is an organic template that exists. So what that
And what
means,
about Vedic astrology? What's your feeling on that?
so Vedic astrology is uh, also takes into account the sidereal zodiac, which is not the tropical, which starts on March 21st.
Right,
However, the Vedics believe that each sign is still 30 degrees, so they don't
okay.
actually use true sidereal or real sky astrology.
Hmm.
True sidereal says when the sun is in alignment with that constellation, it holds that energy. They're not 30 degrees each.
Right,
So they the whole zodiacal um, circumference around us, if you will, is a bandwidth of energy. Aries is being born, Pisces is when you return to spirit, and so it's kind of a life cycle. It's going to flow that way regardless. They say Scorpio is death and rebirth. Well, Ophiuchus represents resurrection and rebirth, and it lives at the end of Scorpio.
hmm.
So it's the same energy. It's just we are understanding it differently. It's the same cycle of
Right,
evolution that you take from Aries to Pisces. It's the same cycle. We've just added this other energy in there that actually is the rebirth energy, not the tail of Scorpio.
right.
Scorpio is death. Ophiuchus is rebirth. Ophiuchus is Jesus and resurrection and Chiron and healing.
See,
Ophiuchus
so
is the
that's
healer.
interesting, right? Then that all of that, the Jesus and the rebirth and all of the resurrection, that's probably why you and I, before taping, were having the whole conversation about God and the word God and how
Of
people are
course.
throwing that word around like so much right now.
Yes, yes, because there is a program running that is trying to split light workers up, and people are saying the battle between good and evil is stronger than ever. And I'm like, yeah, and it's happening within your ego. You're helping
Right,
the good and evil. You're helping the polarity forces by
right,
judgment and trauma continue.
right. Yes,
So the whole idea of ascended astrology is really to help people master who they really are, because what we do is we take where where the sun was in alignment with the constellation. My sun is in the constellation of Taurus when I was born. However, I was born on June 15th, so the sun was actually in the degree point of 23 degrees of Gemini in the tropical zodiac.
right,
Does that mean that one is right and one isn't? That's the part I want everyone to understand, is that both of them are correct. Are both organic? No. Is one a
Right.
program and a construct that we're helping to create? Yes. Does that mean it's not real? No.
Right.
So when you say I identify with my tropical chart more than I do my true sidereal chart, of course you do, because you're a human in the matrix.
Right.
So you're
Right.
going to feel the matrix influence much more than the organic influence that the false matrix has tried to block you from.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so Ptolemy was an astrologer in Greece 2,000 years ago who created the tropical zodiac, started it at March 21st, which is at the time that he did that, we had ended a Platonic year, interestingly enough.
Hmm.
So the sun was in alignment with Aries at that time, in March, when you would think it would be, okay, when he
Right.
started
Right.
that. So, however, he locked that into place. So even though through the precession of the equinoxes, every 72 years, I believe, the zodiac will move back from our perspective 1 degree. So after several thousand years, it's knocked off about 24 degrees now. So at the time when it's 0 degrees of Aries on March 21st for the tropical, it's actually like 6 degrees of Pisces in true sidereal. The sun is in 6 degrees of Pisces in the constellation,
Right.
roughly, if I'm
Right.
doing the math correct, because I'm not a mathematician, I'm a psychic. Um, so you most likely have, when's your birthday?
March 28th.
You have Sun in Pisces in your true sidereal chart. And if I really sat you down and talked to you about what's been coming through for you on a soul level, you would be like, wow, as I've gotten older, I am much more Piscean in the way I want to be, in the way my ego wants to be.
Mhm.
Pisces, the dreamer, the psychic, the mystic, that is you.
Right.
It's not that
Right.
you don't have Pisces placements in your tropical chart in other spots, but I'm saying when you really tune into it, they're all working together. The houses are the external matrix sign. The
Right.
signs are the internal false matrix or construct sign, and then the constellations are the actual organic photonic energy that is being absorbed by all things around it, and we are
Mhm.
receiving this. Now, are we receiving photonic energy from constellations above us? Sure, but they're not activated in our imprint because planets along the ecliptic, if you've got the sun here and all the planets are going around this way, well, that is what we call the ecliptic, where the path of the planets around the sun. And so the zodiac signs exist around here.
Right.
There are constellations up here too, but
Right.
because
Right.
planets don't revolve around the planet this way, those planets don't activate that photonic energy
Right.
because the planets are directly related to your chakras and your energy systems. So when Mars comes into alignment with the constellation, it receives that energy, but before it gets to us, it passes through this barrier, which is this tropical zodiac, which is a construct field that we've created and that we're
Right.
helping to perpetuate,
Right.
that distorts the frequency. So the ascended astrology chart actually takes the constellations, the false matrix tropical signs, and your houses and starts linking them all together too.
Right.
Because, for instance, my sun, my tropical sun, is making a square to my um, true sidereal placement, like Uranus. It's making a square to Uranus. Well, I don't have Sun square Uranus in my actual tropical chart, but my false matrix Sun is making an angle to my organic Uranus, which has its own. There's an energy there as well.
Right.
So
Yeah.
people might be thinking, oh my gosh, I still don't know what even Scorpio means. I don't even know what these houses are. Ascended astrology may not be for you quite yet, okay? And
Right.
that's not
Right.
because you're beneath it, but because it's very complex. Like in your
Right.
ascended astrology chart, we actually look to the moon to identify um, where you are being held back by the matrix. And because the moon is the prison of the soul, it keeps you
That's
in the
interesting.
past, but it's a recorder, it's a receiver. It is, it's what creates your subconscious programming. The moon is what takes the frequencies that are emitted from Saturn's rings and it transduces it and amplifies it down onto the planet to make the false matrix almost inescapable to the sleeping one.
It's just very
Okay.
interesting. Chris, I honestly, we could like talk. We are going to have you back. We're going to pick another topic because just as you know, so Tom gave me another question, which obviously
Yeah, if you have
we can't do.
questions, we could go
But
all
this,
kinds of places,
but
but
this goes into, so he wanted to know your thoughts on the reincarnation
let's
trap,
do
which
it.
was just where you were going. So let's save that for our next time
Oh,
together,
okay, sure.
because that's going to be like,
I have a
I'm
lot to say about that.
yeah, absolutely. But it's, I think so. If you guys listen to this one first so that you're prepared and you've like followed it along, because Chris was really taking us right there in that
I
moment.
was,
And
yes.
then that will be our next and they're giving me goosebumps right now. So
Yeah.
that's a perfect
I would
time
love to
to,
say something before
yeah.
we go
Yes.
to everyone listening. Um, Christopher is a human. I am a human being. I am doing my very best to navigate all the downloads I'm getting, all the distortions I'm reading, all the things that are happening in the matrix right now and in the false matrix and in the spiritual world. My my hope for everyone listening is that you do the work. It doesn't have to be with psychedelics or plant medicine, but that you're healing yourself often and loving yourself often and unconditionally loving others as much as you can without assigning that a God reason for doing so, or I'm doing this so I don't go to heaven or hell, or that I don't go to hell. Um, if just start reaching into, can I be of service to others? Does that feel right to me? Um, can I love myself through this? And through that whole process of healing, your psychic abilities and your intuitive abilities are going to open. That's just the
Yes.
natural byproduct because that's your organic template.
Right.
Psychics aren't special. They just have um, activated or remembered something that we all have,
Right.
and in some degree. But when you awaken your psychic abilities and your intuition, you'll start to be able to feel when something is right for you and when something is not.
Right.
And there are teachings that I felt intuitively repelled by years ago that I now feel are a truth for me because my
Mm-hmm.
ego wasn't able to accept it at the time. And it
Right.
also wasn't time for me to accept it.
Right.
There's nothing bad that happened that I didn't accept it at that time. So if you're listening to this and this got a little weird, how do you think we feel? And also, I really, really, really feel so much love from you, Jody, and so much openness and kind of a soul contract, even that we've continued to circle around to each other.
Yes. Yes,
And
for
that's
sure.
what really matters is that the people who love you keep seeing you and that you keep seeing others who are trying their best. Because even if you are someone who is triggered by some of this or feel like this is out of control, these people are insane, they need to go get a regular job, whatever your ego might be saying about it, just be open, let it be something that's there without it becoming a belief, just like the indigenous tribes of Gabon, Africa, who work with iboga, the Bwiti people. They do not believe in anything until they've had their own experience of it, with it. Yet when someone in their tribe says, I saw an alien ship, they say that I do not believe in the aliens for me, but I believe you.
Right.
And when I
Right.
see them, I will believe them for me.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that it isn't real. It is
No.
now put into the box that our society seems to have lost this box. There's either
Right.
right, wrong, there,
Yes.
real, fake. What about the realm of possibility?
Right.
It can
That's
just
Spirit's
sit
just saying
here.
anything is possible.
Just let it sit there, okay?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
also, I don't want anyone to leave this conversation in fear. If you're like, oh my God, reptilians are running the planet and satanic
Mhm.
ritual abuse and the matrix, how do we get out of this?
Right.
Careful, because that franticness and that going cuckoo around it, I've already done it for you, and you're gonna end up being like,
Yes. You're going to
it was a
thank us
waste
for
of my
not having to
time.
go through that. Yes.
And and you're also feeding the matrix by doing that. So if rabbit
Right.
holes you're going down are not feeling good to you, stop scrolling. It
Right.
doesn't mean you're not ready for it. It means that whatever it is not a match to you at that time. That doesn't mean that it is real or that it is bad.
Right.
Um, we have to stop being so like this is one truth and the only truth we should always agree upon. There may
Hmm.
be nuggets of what I've said during this time that resonate with someone, and some of the other stuff didn't make any sense. Whatever that resonance it caused, whether it was a trigger or an aha moment and you feel super understood by some of this, both are beautiful and both can
Yes.
be alchemized for your healing and ascension process. We are all
Absolutely.
in this together. And
Yes.
although there are false light prophets or whatever they're calling them now, and people who step up into this field like we do, many of us, even if we don't have the right answers, or we're also taken over by the archons and they're infiltrating Jody and Chris and making them say things like good and bad as a program. Whatever the case may be that your ego is feeling around it, we over here only want to help and share what's come through for us. And it's real simple like that. And I love humanity and animals and this entire planet. And I am from this planet, even though I'm from all kinds of places in the galaxy. This is supposed to be the Garden of Eden. This is supposed to be heaven on earth.
Right. The
So,
prime earth, which we'll have to talk about
yeah,
as well.
Tara. So please
So,
know
so
it's
Chris,
all
if
love.
people want to get a hold of you and they want to work with you and they want to experience, how is that? I'm going to have all your links and everything in on all of the Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts. But what's the best way for them to reach you?
So I'm in the process of creating several websites because my business is split into different um, entities, if you will.
Hmm.
So if you're listening to this far in, not too far in the future, but at some point that isn't now, there will be the medicinealchemist.com, ascendedastrology.com, and ascendedceo.com. But for right now, you can find me at chryskyng.com, which is sort of a mixture of all of those things. And I offer sessions. I do retreats in sacred sites like Mount Shasta, Joshua Tree, the Big Island, Hawaii, Sedona, where I take light workers. And yes, we work with medicine, but there's many different other healing modalities that we use. I am creating courses and all kinds of tools to help people become an ascended astrologer, become a shamanic healer, and a medicine facilitator. My main goal is to help others not just tap out of the matrix themselves, but like make this their full time job. We need to be full time matrix slayers. I guess
Right.
that's not the best way I want to put that. We should be full time light workers, period. So I also help people start their own business and make all these things that they're coming into their soul mission and their main point of receiving abundance and income.
That's
So
perfect.
yeah,
That's great. So we thank you, Chris, so much for sharing space with us and having all of this. I'm telling you, there's so much that you've talked about that again, it's just opening up for me. And I appreciate that. And I'm sure that that will be like that for other people as well. And we'll have you back because we're going to talk about the reincarnation trap, which again, admittedly, I don't know anything about it. So you will teach me and we will
yeah.
learn together, guys.
Yes. Thank you so much for everyone listening, and thank you for having me on here. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Collective Soulversations Podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we hope that you found our chat both inspiring and thought provoking. Your support means everything to us, and we're excited to keep this journey going with you. So make sure that you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a review and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps us grow and connect with more wonderful listeners like you. Until next time, stay curious and keep those soulversations flowing.